They dumped me at the airport before sunrise with $60 in a smirk. I watched their taillights fade and counted the cash like a receipt for betrayal. I am Grant Whitaker, 66 Army vet with 2 Bronze Stars, retired avionics tech who still labels every wire. What my son Ethan and his wife Brianna did not know was simple. I had been logging them for months. Every swipe on my bank statements, every whisper about guardianship, every fake deed draft they left open on a screen. They called me confused to the neighbors. They filmed my flinches on a phone and called it safety. They thought I would sign because my hands shake. They forgot I keep a manila envelope, a lockbox, and a recorder that reads 42 minutes 13 seconds. I was not broken. I was preparing a public lesson. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The curb breathed jet exhaust and damp concrete. The recorder warmed in my shirt pocket the way a small animal warms in a hand. I flattened the 60 on my palm and photographed it under the sodium lamp serial numbers, sharp. 1 picture for my archive, 1 for the file. A TSA cart rattled past and the driver did not look at me. People ignore what looks like practice. This was practice. I didn't buy a ticket. I pushed the suitcase toward the taxi stand and listened to the wheels click out a quiet metronome. The sky held that pre-dawn gray that makes bad plans feel possible. A driver cracked his window and asked if I was headed downtown. Cedar Ridge, I said. He nodded and popped the trunk. The recorder counted seconds against my ribs. Time is a pressure you can use. In the back seat, I spread the 60 across my knee and took a second photo with the cab number in frame. The road unfurled. The heater blew steadily. I opened the bank app and answered the 2-factor prompt with a thumb that shook once and then steadied. Freeze. Remove. Revoke. Each tap a switch on a familiar panel. I scrolled to the autopays and killed the ones they had set to keep themselves comfortable. Boutique memberships, creator suites, the Audi that wore my name like jewelry. Fixed bills stayed green. The house would keep its heartbeat. The screen flashed confirmations one by one and I screenshotted each with the time at the top. A man can measure control in little padlock icons. I made a folder and dropped the images in. Then I mirrored them to the small cloud account Ethan had never guessed I kept. Belt and suspenders. Under the chest strap of my seatbelt, I felt the recorder's edge and tapped it. 42 minutes, 13 seconds looked back like a promise. The cab's meter clicked in time with my breath. The driver raised his eyes in the mirror once as if to check if I was real. I nodded. He looked relieved. My phone buzzed. A text tile opened like a door on a cold day. We'll handle everything at home. Enjoy the cousins. The sentence wore a smile that didn't belong to it. I took a screenshot and marked the clock in the corner with my thumbnail so it left a little crescent on the glass. Evidence is a habit. I dropped the image into the folder and closed the screen. Not rage procedure. I set it under my breath and watched the reflection of my mouth in the side window. The words didn't fog the glass. They cleared it. The cab pulled to the curb in front of my house. The porch looked unbothered. The driver handed me the paper receipt and I signed my name in block letters like a recruit. I snapped that 2-meter total visible and folded it into my shirt pocket with the 60. He waited until the key turned in my lock. Good drivers understand checklists. The engine idled a beat, then moved off into the morning. Inside, I had not turned on the kitchen light yet. I stood by the sink and let my eyes adjust to the outline of the table and the frame that holds my ribbons. When I finally flipped the switch, the bulb washed the glass with a clean stripe. It landed in the same spot it always hits. That constancy steadied me. The manila envelope came off the pantry shelf and onto the table with a soft paper sigh. I set the 60 on top and photographed it again under the kitchen light, the shadow of the bills crisp on the wood. Then I lined up the taxi receipt and the first bank freeze screen. The little printer coughed awake when I told it to. 3 sheets slid out warm and curling until I palmed them flat. I clipped the corner and wrote entry 001 in the upper right corner with a pen that never bleeds. Case log time. The black notebook has a hardcover and grid pages. I opened it and wrote the header slowly enough to make each letter the same height. Case log. Date. 0506 hours. Location residence kitchen. I wrote the first entry plain. Airport drop with $60. No ticket purchased. Taxi to residence. Immediate administrative actions freeze discretionary auto-pays, revoke authorized users, and preserve screenshots. Attach taxi receipt, $60 image confirmation captures. Intent stabilize systems, preserve artifacts, limit surface area. I underlined the last line once. Lines keep me honest. The phone buzzed again. From Ethan. We'll swing by later. Make sure the mail's handled. I let it sit on the screen until the notification faded. Then I opened the message so the timestamp stamped itself in the margin. Another screenshot. Another print. Paper is the kind of witness that does not mind being asked twice. I poured water into the kettle and put it on the burner. The flame snapped and settled. I pulled the lockbox from the cabinet under the sink and set it on the chair where Era used to fold the mail. The combination spun under my fingers without thought. Inside lay the items that make an old house heavy. Deed damp from decades, the registrar's raised seal catching light, you can feel it with your thumb. Pension statements lined left to right like a runway. The VA capacity letters with the embossed crest always look deeper than the ink. I left the lid open and breathed that faint metal smell that comes with old hinges. It calms men who learned their lives by tools. The kettle hissed as if surprised. Coffee grounds in the cone and the slow pour that turns the water brown like memory. I don't drink until it cools. I watched the steam rise and fade and wrote a second entry while it did. Entry 002. Reconciled the app with fixed bills. Noted green indicators. Canceled boutique memberships marked care. Took screenshots. Mirrored to the secondary cloud. Backup complete. I added a note in smaller letters. Recorder at 42 minutes 13 seconds. Battery at 90%. The number looked like an oath on paper. I took the first stack of prints and slid them into a clear sleeve, then into the envelope. The flap kissed shut with a small click like a polite door. I didn't seal it. Not yet. The envelope still had breathing to do. The house felt different when the coffee was ready. It always does. I set the mug down to the left of the notebook where the light falls most evenly. I drank once and let the heat settle at the back of my throat. The clock over the stove ticked a little faster than it should. I prefer a clock that hurries a bit. It keeps you honest. I moved through the rooms with the phone held low, taking photographs of things they like to call confusion, and I like to call evidence. The pill organizer closed and aligned Monday through Sunday. The calendar with Thursday blocked for an appointment I chose, not the one they set. The mailbox inside the door with the lid down and the slot is clean. Each picture filed, each picture printed, each print labeled with entry number and time. A simple ritual to replace the slickness of their words. Back at the table, I opened the bank app again and scrolled to the list of authorized users on the card that pays for groceries and nothing else. I removed Ethan's name and confirmed the removal with my thumb. The app chirped its little approval tone. I saved that too. Then I swiped to the mutual account I never wanted but tolerated for optics. I froze the debit card linked to it and left the account alive for utilities. The toggle slid, and a tiny padlock drew itself in the corner of the screen like a stamp on the day. I took its picture. I wrote another line in the log. Entry 003. Authorizations revised to essential. Ethan was removed from the card ending 4412. Mutual debit frozen. Fixed auto pays remain active. Confirmations archived. The pen scratched just enough to sound like work and not like theater. I have no patience for the theater before noon. The printer finished another set as the phone vibrated on the table. A new text bubble from Ethan. We'll handle everything. I watched the 3 words assemble themselves without punctuation. I let the message open. I took its picture. I printed it. Then I placed that sheet between the bank freeze confirmation and the $60 photo. In the stack, the sentence looked smaller than it sounded. Paper shrinks men that way. I pulled the manila envelope back toward me and slid my palm across it from bottom to flap to press the air out. It made that soft sound envelope glue makes when it rubs against itself. Familiar. A sound from tax seasons and care packages and counted blessings. I slipped the taxi receipt into the front pocket so it would be the first thing seen. Front pockets are for origin stories. The kitchen light made the stripe across my ribbons again. I stood and let my eye follow it into the glass. Bronze red-green. Surfaces that learned light the hard way. I raised my right hand just enough to feel the weight of the gesture without making a show of it. At 19, I swore to do things by the book. At 66, I still liked the smell of paper. I wiped the rim of the mug with my thumb and set it back exactly where the coaster ring wanted it. Then I closed the notebook and slid it into the inside pocket of my jacket where the flap of the envelope rides. The recorder went back into the shirt pocket nearest my heart. The lockbox clicked shut and returned to the cabinet, not because I wanted to hide it, but because cabinets are where things rest until they are needed. On the way to the door, I checked the deadbolt. The latch moved smoothly. Outside, the street was still thin with morning. A jay scolded something none of us could see. I stepped onto the porch and breathed once, long and easy. Not rage procedure. The words fit better in the open air. I went back in and printed one more copy of the bank freeze screen, one more of the text, and clipped them behind the $60 photo. I slid the stack into the envelope and pressed the flap closed a hair farther than before. Then I wrote in the log a final line for the morning. Entry 004. The package started. Evidence breathing well. The phone lay quiet now. The screen showed nothing but my own face in reflection and the kitchen light above my head. I tapped it awake, looked over the folder names one more time, and then set it face down next to the manila envelope. The house hummed. The day had a plan. I put my hand on the envelope so my palm felt the paper's spine. It felt like a living thing. It felt like the beginning of an answer. The kitchen light lay a razor line across the glass that holds my ribbons. Bronze red green. The colors waited without asking for comment. I set the lockbox on the chair and opened it enough to smell the hinge. Metal tells you if you're serious. I pulled the VA capacity letters and fed them to the printer, then held the first sheet to the light. The embossed seal threw a little shadow that you can feel with your thumb. Texture is truth. I lined the letters at the top of the table and squared their corners with the side of my hand. The camera on the phone made its small throat noise as I shot them close and wide, then again with the case log open in the frame. Click, click. The images dropped into a folder named with today's date and the hour. Naming is a way of breathing. Bank statements next. I stacked 3 months at a time, slid a straight edge under the first page, and pulled a highlighter down each Audi lease line until the yellow looked like runway paint. The sound of the felt on paper ran soft, steady, convincing. I totaled the column on a sticky note and pressed it to the margin until the adhesive bit. The Audi was never for me. It was a costume. Restaurants came in a different color. Names that sell mood instead of food. Ember, Slate, Flora. Charges tagged care on nights my calendar says I made tea after 9 and watched the streetlight come on. I highlighted those entries in green and wrote the dates from my wall calendar beside them. The numbers don't have feelings. They have patterns. The phone camera sounded again as I took close shots of the highlights, the sticky notes, the margins where I wrote home in small letters. I printed the best frames and let the pages slide out warm. The printer's rollers whispered like gloves on rope. I tapped the stack to square it and clipped the top with a binder clip. The metal snapped closed with a clean little bite. Bites focus on a man. I opened my email and ran a header drill the way we used to run bench tests. Subject lines, senders, times, routes. A message from Ethan 2 weeks back with the kind of subject that he thinks is helpful. Planning for peace of mind. I opened the details and photographed the header area twice zoomed and then wide with the clock in the corner. I did not forward it. I did not reply. I printed the photographs and slid them into a sleeve labeled headers. Labels are the rails that keep cars from wandering. The lockbox sat open enough to show the pension statements, the deed in its sheet protector, and the spare set of blank forms I keep the way other people keep umbrellas. I did not need them yet. I put my hand on the box lid and let it rest there a second like you rest a palm on a hood to learn if the engine was recently alive. It was alive. I moved to the hall closet where the printer hums at shoulder height. The display showed ready, but I tapped through to job history to clear the deck. One line sat there in gray. Grocery list.pdf completed. Another sat in red. Final deed Grant Whitaker.pdf spooling. The second line had that stubborn little circle icon. I took a photo of the queue with the time visible and the Wi-Fi name in the corner. The camera made it sound like a tiny valve. I pressed print screen on the laptop and saved a second copy to a thumb drive that already holds the audio backup. You do not rely on one road out when the weather turns. I tried to clear the jam without clearing the evidence. The tray fought me for a second, then gave. One corner of a page showed itself with a line of black where the toner had tried to bite. I did not pull it. I took the picture first, the torn white next to the file name on the screen. Then I freed the paper with 2 fingers like extracting a pin from a bundle that matters. The page came away with half a footer and no header. Sometimes the printable part of a lie is the smallest. Back in the kitchen, I laid the Q photos next to the email header prints and bracketed them with 2 bank pages that showed the day Ethan's account paid for a notary stamp at an office supply store. I wrote the amounts under each and circled the time. I printed the montage photo and clipped it to the top with the same kind of clip we used on shift logs. A simple gallows for bad timing. The house made its steady noises. The refrigerator coughed and then worked. A truck downshifted 1 block over and let out the long sigh of air brakes. The coffee cooled to that point where it stops being hot and starts being useful. I took a sip and rolled it under my tongue like you taste a decision. Decisions taste better with paperwork. I pulled the VA letters closer and read Dr. Naomi Chen's sentences again. Oriented to person, place, time, and situation. Adherent to treatment. No evidence of diminished capacity. Her pen strokes are clean. The seal sits heavy and high. I placed 1 letter beside the printer Q photo and took a picture of that pair. Competence next to failed forgery is the kind of duet even a cheap speaker can carry. I opened the phone gallery and moved every new image into a nested set of folders. Bank headers printer VAQ. Then I mirrored them to the secondary cloud account and the little external drive that lives in the lockbox. I wrote the mirror times in the log and the sizes of the folders in kilobytes. The numbers look like trivia until somebody accuses your files of being stitched together. Stitching is for quilts. The highlighter worked through 2 more months of dining and subscriptions, and I switched to a fresh one when the color went faint. New markers lay their lines like they have somewhere to be. I matched those lines to my calendar squares and noted the mismatch. Care money buys other people's praise. The manila envelope opened and closed as I moved groups of prints into sleeves. The flap made its quiet sound in both directions like a well-trained door. I didn't seal anything yet. The envelope needs air while it learns what it holds. I slid one of the VA letters into the front pocket so the seal shows when the envelope opens. I want the first thing they see to be the thing they can't debate. If it won't seat you, turned it wrong, not the world. I said it to the paper the way I used to say it to new text with a handful of mangled connectors. The world sets fine when you align the pins. The phone chimed in the other room. I let it. Then I picked it up and checked the camera roll to make sure the Q photo was sharp enough to read the file name without squinting. The letters were clean. The red circle around spooling drew the eye the way a runway flare tells a pilot where not to land. I printed 1 large copy and trimmed the margins so you can see nothing but the mistake and the name of the person who made it. I added a note to the log. Entry 009. Printer Q documented. Final deed Grant Whitaker. PDF spooling jammed. Photos taken Q jammed sheet laptop screen. Cross-ref email header. Subject Final deed signed Thur. Attachment size 1.2 MB. Correlates to notary purchase at 14:53 hours the day prior. I underlined correlates once because lines are for discipline, not drama. The ribbons on the wall took the same strip of light again. They do not argue. They do not explain. They reflect. I stood for a second and let them be. The arrow was used to check the frame once a year and wipe the dust with a cloth that never left lint. She would have liked the way the seal shone today. She always liked the work more than the talk. I gathered the highlighted statements into a sheaf and wrapped a rubber band around them, then slid that bundle into the envelope behind the VA letters. The band made a small sound against the paper and settled. Bands hold better when the stack has edges that agree with each other. I checked the phone battery and the recorder battery, 90% and full. I plugged them both in anyway and let the cords fall in parallel lines across the counter. Parallel lines calm a mind trained by schematics. I set a timer for 10 minutes and wrote the next entry while the power climbed. Entry 010, audit pass 1 complete. Statements highlighted and totaled, headers captured, Q documented, VA letters reprinted, mirroring complete, Envelope staged. I put a period after staged and left it alone. When the timer chimed, I unplugged both devices and coiled the cords the way we taught kids who thought a cord could take a kink without consequence. Then I put the cords in the drawer beside the notebooks and closed it without a sound. Drawers earn silence when they hold the right things. I carried the envelope to the window and let morning shift across the seal one more time. Then I set it back on the table and pressed my palm to its spine until I felt my heartbeat in the paper. The printer Q photo sat on top, and the file name looked like it wanted to be called something else. It doesn't get that wish. In the log, I wrote one last line for the pass. Entry 011. All artifacts were photographed and printed. Backup present. Q jam preserved. The pen lifted and I placed it at the top of the notebook, the way a mechanic lays a wrench where he will find it even in the dark. The kitchen light kept its stripe. The house held steady. The sacrifice was counted and logged. The HOA's lawn wore a fake smile. Folding tables, checkered cloths, crock pots, sweating the usual choreography. Kids orbited the bouncy castle until the grass bruised. I set down a casserole and watched the steam drift like a thin flag. The recorder in my shirt pocket blinked awake when I pressed it once. The screen flashed 4213 and went dark again. Machines remember what men prefer to blur. Ethan took a position by the grill with the men who talked about tires and rates. He bent toward a neighbor and pitched his voice low enough to carry. Sundowning, he said, like he was testing a medical term on his tongue. The word fell on napkins and stuck to paper plates. He wanted it to travel home in other people's trash. Brianna drifted between clusters with a pitcher of tea and her phone at her chest. "We filmed for safety," she told a woman who already believed her. She smiled when she said safety, then tapped the screen to make the lens work harder. The tap sounded like a metronome. I adjusted the casserole lid and let the recorder listen for me. Surveillance should not have to raise its voice. I looked at the name tags and chose a target. Mr. Avery, HOA Secretary. I greeted him by first name and last initial and asked about his brother at Lackland. He blinked, then smiled, then told me the training class date I already wrote in last month's log. He asked how I remembered. I lifted one shoulder and nodded at the casserole. "Food keeps lists if you ask it right." Ethan slid closer with a paper plate and a practiced laugh. "Dad's been wandering a little," he said to no one and everyone. "Happens when the light goes," he added as if the sun reports to him. I took a glass of water and counted 3 swallows. Water gives a man an excuse to be quiet. Brianna leaned in with the tea. "We had a moment last night," she said to the banker's wife. The phone tilted so the camera could collect faces. "He thought the milk belonged in the cabinet," she whispered, and made the word milk sound like evidence. The banker's wife nodded, because nodding is what she does when she wants her life to keep its shape. I set the glass down and asked Mr. Avery about the pool ingress hatch that sticks when humidity rises. He laughed and said I must have worked maintenance in another life. I said signal work teaches you friction. He looked at my hands and then at my eyes and decided to end the joke. People end jokes when the truth shows its teeth. The HOA president lined us up for a group photo, everyone in height order without anyone saying it. Brianna slid near me and angled her camera so my shoulder filled the edge of her frame. "Quick snap for the page," she said. I turned enough to look at the glass door beyond us. In it, the phone's black screen reflected the scene with clarity you do not see in real time. My shoulder, her hand, the square lens, the line of people, the logo on the tablecloth. I lifted my phone and pretended to check a text. Instead, I framed the reflection and took a single clean shot that held all of us without asking permission. Reflections do not lie to the person who controls the angle. A boy ran by with a stick and 3 fathers yelled his name at once. The grill hissed and flared. Ethan clapped a man on the back and said, "We have a guardianship consult on Thursday, just routine." He rolled the word routine until it lost its edges. I walked to the bulletin board the HOA keeps near the gate. Flyers overlapped like shingles. At the bottom right sat a half-sheet printed crooked. Memorial Day Parade volunteers. Chair Harold Ruiz. A thumbtack missed straight and left a crescent bite in the cork. I touched the corner and let go. Seeds do not need speeches. Later at the dessert table, Brianna accepted compliments for the newsletter she formats. "We have a care tips column this month," she said to the group, eyes flicking toward me and back to her audience. "Document gently. Keep routines. Speak softly," she said softly, louder than the other words. I took a proof from the stack and read my name, which was misspelled in the second line. I circled the error with a pen from the holder and slid the proof under the casserole dish for weight. Care does not forget the names it uses for leverage. The sun dropped a notch, and the grass turned a kinder color. I thanked the president, shook 3 hands, and left before the bouncy castle sagged. The recorder slept against my ribs, and the photograph of the reflection sat in my cloud with a timestamp Ethan couldn't erase. Not all safety footage belongs to the person holding the phone. Sunday, the narthex smelled like coffee that had known the percolator too long, and lemon polish that had known every pew. I took a bulletin and read the hymn numbers as if they could fix anything. They cannot but men like form before content. Joe the usher greeted me by name. I asked about his boy at Fort Sill and the date he's due back. July 20th, I said before he could. He smiled because he didn't have to correct me. Precision travels on small rails. Ethan arrived with smiles for the people who like to be smiled at. He guided me by the elbow 2 steps across a threshold I have crossed for 20 years. He pitched his voice to the choir ladies. He gets tired in the evenings, he said, and made tired sound like a diagnosis. Brianna stood 3 paces back with her phone down and her front camera open. We film for safety, she told a deacon's wife without looking up from the screen. The deacon's wife nodded and took a sugar packet. Sugar makes sour easier to swallow. I thanked Denise for refilling the napkins and asked about her grandson's promotion. E4 by October, right? She brightened like a porch light. Then I glanced at the mission board and touched the pin on Kansas City to straighten the string. Someone had left it slack. Strings are maps. Maps earn respect. We gathered for a coffee hour that has not changed since the carpet was new. The pastor's wife asked how I was holding up, and I told her the truth. Here I said, seen and steady. She smiled with the kind of eyes that make rooms safer. Ethan slipped behind her and told 2 men from the men's group that a lawyer would meet us on Thursday to talk about durable paperwork. He likes the word durable because it sounds like a jacket you can wear in weather without being told no. Brianna maneuvered near and held her phone at an angle she thinks hides the lens. It does not. The display case beside the coat rack offered me another reflection. In it, her hand, the phone, my profile, and beyond that, the bulletin board. A parade flyer with Harold's name in bold, the ink a little thick where the printer overfed. I moved a step to put the flyer square in the rectangle. Then I took the picture from my chest, not my eyes. Angle is a profession. The choir director asked for warm-ups, and the tenors made the wrong sound for a measure, then found the line. I tasted coffee and nutmeg on a cookie someone made from a recipe that expects colder weather. Brianna smiled into her lens with a deacon's wife I barely know, making the banner in the background read "Welcome Home." She tried to keep me in soft focus at the edge. I stood a half step farther out and became a shoulder. Ownership prefers full faces. A boy from the youth group asked me if avionics is hard. I told him hard is the wrong word. Careful is the right one. He nodded like he understood both grammar and circuitry. Ethan stage whispered to a man with a Yeti cup that I had put the milk in the cabinet. The man looked at the cup and then at me and said nothing. Silence does not endorse. The pastor approached, which settled the air by itself. "How are you, Grant?" he asked, and waited, because he knew good questions required space to echo. "Here," I said again and tapped my jacket pocket so the recorder felt included. He nodded and looked at my face instead of the stories that travel faster than eyes. He is careful with his verbs. People began to stack cups and move toward the doors. At the bulletin board, I lifted the edge of the parade flyer and straightened the top tack so the paper hung true. The name Harold Ruiz sat clean and almost proud. I took a photo of the flyer with the bulletin's masthead in the lower corner. Then I stepped back and took a second with the phone's black screen reflecting the shot in a second frame. Mirrors prove intent. Ethan caught my elbow at the door and smiled at Joe. Thursday at 2, he said, bright as a weather report. I nodded once and moved my hand away from his grip. We'll make this easy, he added, and thought the word easy would sell today. I let him keep it for now. He collects words the way children collect stones at the edge of water. They feel heavy until they leave the pocket. In the car, I studied the photo of the reflection from the HOA door and the second from the display case. In both, the phone sits at the same tilt and the lens points at me when the mouth says safety. The chain of custody starts before the file exists. This is what a rigged scene looks like. At home, I set the HOA newsletter proof on the table. Brianna's care tips sat in a neat font beside a picture of a plant that needs less water than she thinks. The second line spelled my name with an extra letter in the middle, the kind of mistake that happens when you need me present but not whole. I circled it with a thin pen and took the picture under the kitchen light. Misnamed is not cared for. I wrote in the log with the pen that stays where it is put. Entry 0144, HOA potluck, smear terms used sundowning wandering, recorder on, reflection capture of filming, parish coffee hour, safety filming witnessed, credibility burnish ushers named dates recalled, parade flyer documented. I stopped and added a sentence that felt like it needed a line to itself. Precision is not a symptom. The house sighed when the heater came on. The envelope on the table kept its flat dignity. I slipped the newsletter proof with the circled error into a sleeve and filed the reflection photos behind the Q screenshot. Layers make pictures honest. I pressed my palm to the folder's spine and felt it answer. Evidence grows well in rooms where nobody raises their voice. They came in before the kettle finished. Ethan first laptop under his arm like a file he meant to win with. Brianna was behind him, phone in her pocket, smile tuned for company. The kitchen held the cool of mid-morning. Light from the window drew a clean bar across the table. I let the light speak first. Ethan set the laptop down with a confidence that wanted applause. Quick update, Dad, he said, bright as weather. We confirmed a guardianship consult, Thursday, 2 o'clock. He slid a glossy brochure across the table. Planning for peace of mind, soft sweaters, pastel teeth. He tapped a paragraph he wanted me to memorize. Less burden for you, he said, more structure. He liked the sound of structure when he could draw it himself. I took the pill organizer from the counter and placed it in the stripe of light. The lids were shut, Monday through Sunday, morning and evening. The letters faced him. I touched each compartment once the way you check fuses when a panel's humming. I'm not confused, I said. I'm documenting. Brianna smiled wider and set a hand on the back of a chair. Of course, she said. We document for safety too. Her eyes went to the phone in her pocket, then back to me. The room remembered last Sunday without effort. I kept my voice low enough to stay out of the camera she would eventually lift. Documenting is a habit, I said, not a mood. Ethan opened the laptop and spun it toward me. Calendar blocks in gray and blue looked back. Thursday at 2 sat bold. We'll pick you up, he said, already making the schedule wear his shoes. I reached for my own phone and opened my calendar. I blocked 8 to 9 on Thursday with a steady thumb. 0800 Herald Review. I took a screenshot and let the camera sound count for both of us. I set the phone beside the pill organizer so the screen and the plastic shared light. Let's keep this simple, Ethan said. The attorney's good. He deals with these situations all the time. He made situations sound like loose screws you could tighten without checking the manual. Our job is to keep you safe, Dad. Brianna nodded like a bobblehead that wanted to be real. We don't want to frighten you, she added. Fright is an afterthought at this age, I said. I prefer procedures. I stood and pulled the VA capacity letters from the file drawer. The printer woke itself with a hum that sounded like permission. I fed it the PDF from the portal and watched the first page slide out. The embossed seal caught the kitchen light even before the ink settled. Dr. Naomi Chen's signature lay clean at the bottom where honest signatures go, oriented to person, place, time, and situation, adherent to treatment, no evidence of diminished capacity. I let the page cool in my hand and slid it onto the tabletop edge aligned with the pill organizer. Then the second letter, same seal, same sentences that do not get bored with themselves. I placed it above the calendar screenshot. Brianna brushed a crumb that did not exist off the table's edge. We love you, she said, soft and shaped. We only want what's best. I looked at the seal's ridges and then at her hand. Best often wears a different name on the paperwork, I said. Ethan pretended not to hear. He pulled a beige folder from his bag and set it near the laptop as if that made it friendlier. Just drafts, he said. We're not asking you to sign anything today. He lifted the top page half an inch and let it fall. The printer gave a little cough and stopped moving. Machines make their own commentary. I brought my glasses down and slid the VA letters 1 inch toward him so he would have to look at them to reach the folder. He didn't. He tapped the brochure again to see if it had more authority than the seal. The meeting is just a conversation, he repeated. A professional will ask you about preferences, food, routines, finance. He said finance last as if order could change meaning. I moved my phone toward me and typed a short message to Harold. 0800 review, thu. Bring a notary kit, TRO draft on hold. I added the calendar screenshot and hit send. The bubble left and returned with a single dot. Harold answers in dots when the room has already decided. We should also discuss bills, Ethan said, switching lanes. Automatic payments ease your mind. He rotated the laptop to show a spreadsheet with color bars he thought made him look competent. I let my eyes land on a tab I knew. Audi. He kept talking. The words sounded like they'd been rehearsed in a mirror. We noticed a few duplicates. No harm. We'll sort it out. I took a breath and let it out slowly. Open the beige folder, I said. He blinked and smiled. Nothing to hide, he said, and flipped it toward me. The top sheet was a draft deed printed from a template that did not belong in my house. The witness line sat near the bottom. Witness 1 read Brianna Whitaker in loops that tried to look professional. Witness 2 was blank. The notary stamp area wore a ghost rectangle empty. I looked at the blank and then at Brianna's hand. Oh, that, she said light. Just a practice. We wanted to see how the form looked on paper. Forms look their worst on paper, I said. They leave fingerprints. Ethan leaned back and steadied his face. We're exploring options, he said. Don't be defensive. Defensive is a word people use when they need you to be quiet. I looked down at the VA letters until my pulse slowed, then back up at the pill organizer. The lid still faced him. I closed Monday and Tuesday with my thumb. Click. Click. The small sound did not need courage. He tapped the calendar again. 2 o'clock, he said. We pick you up at 1:15. I prefer to arrive on my own, I said. He paused a half second too long. Parking's tight, he said. We'll make it easy. Easy hides its own freight. I took the beige folder and slid it 2 inches toward the light. The witness line looked naked there. Missouri asks for 2 unrelated witnesses and a licensed notary, I said. He said nothing. I turned the page so the blank space could be seen without me pointing. He swallowed because throats remember what eyes pretend not to see. Brianna adjusted her smile to the version meant for small crises. We'll have everything proper on the day, she said. That's what we're discussing now, isn't it? Proper is cheaper in the morning, I said. More expensive by dinner. I picked up the VA letter and held it. The seal's raised ring pressed against my fingertip. I slid the letter back down and placed the calendar screenshot beside it like a pair of instruments laid on a cloth. I looked at Ethan and spoke without heat. All comms noted. The recorder under my shirt felt the words and did what it always does. It remembered. He collected the brochure and his professionalism. We're on your side, he said, the way a man talks to a client he wants to keep. We can bring soup later. I nodded at the doorframe, not at him. Doorframes hold houses up without asking for thanks. At the sink, Brianna rinsed a clean cup and set it down carefully so it would look useful. She wiped a spot that did not exist and held the towel with both hands like it might run away. Thursday will be good, she said to the air. The air declined to answer. Ethan slid the beige folder back into his bag but left a corner sticking out. I rested my palm on the table so the veins flattened and my hand stopped its small tremor. I lifted my phone and took a photo of the corner where the witness line showed through thin paper. The date stamp on the screen slid into the frame. I took another with the calendar and the VA letters visible. Evidence looks best in its own company. He moved toward the door, then turned. Be ready at 1:45, he said. I nodded once. He took it as assent and left. The door clicked. The house breathed out. I sat a moment with the pill organizer and listened to the printer finish a job I had sent an hour ago and forgotten about. It spat a page and fell quiet. I stood and gathered the VA letters, the calendar print, and the message confirmation to Harold. I clipped them together and wrote Thursday morning across the top in small block letters that looked like they belonged to someone younger. I placed the bundle in the manila envelope and left the flap open. On the counter, the beige corner of the draft deed peeked out of the bag where Ethan had stowed it. He had not zipped the pocket. I did not touch it. I took one more picture of that corner with Brianna's loops showing through and the blank witness line like a missing tooth. Then I turned off the printer and opened the window an inch to let the air out, noticing we were done talking. In the log, I wrote the next entry. Entry 016. Confrontation at the kitchen table. Guardianship consult pushed for Thursday 1400. Statement given: I'm not confused. I'm documenting. Pill organizer placed in light. VA letters printed and presented. Calendar screenshot created. Text to Harold 0800 review. Bring a notary kit. TRO draft on hold. Evidence observed draft deed witness line 1. Brianna line 2. Blank. No notary. All comms noted. The clock ticked once and found its pace again. The stripe of light moved an inch across the table and found the edge of the organizer. The lids looked steadier in that spot. I closed Wednesday with my thumb and listened to the small click. Procedure is the sound a house makes when it decides to stand up straight. The fellowship hall smelled like percolator coffee floor wax and orange slices drying on paper plates. The room hummed in a low, polite key. I took a church bulletin from the stack and folded it once so the hymn numbers faced out. The recorder in my pocket felt the warmth of the room and slept as it should. I do not wake tools until the work requires it. Ethan reached me first with that public smile he wears like a lapel pin. He touched my elbow 2 inches past necessary and turned us so the nearest circle could see the angle. He told Mrs. Lang I was doing great with the routine. He told the youth minister I was better when the evenings were quiet. He gave my life a shape with the ease of a man arranging cutlery. He performed Dutiful Son like he'd rehearsed it since Wednesday. He prefers a spotlight that looks unearned. Brianna hovered at 9 o'clock phone, low front camera open, that neutral half smile people wear when they want their motives to look smooth. We film for safety, she said to a deacon's wife who nodded before the word finished its work. Safety tastes like sugar when you serve it in a church kitchen. The lens stayed on a steady little pupil looking for tremors. She does not understand that tremors belong to me. I thanked Joe the usher for holding the west door when the wind fought back last month. Then I asked about his son at Fort Sill and the date he flies home. July 20th, I said, and let the number rest where it wanted. He smiled with his whole face and set down the stack of cups like they'd gotten lighter. Dates are quieter than rumors. Ethan steered a traveler mug into my hand with ceremonial care. We're keeping him active, he told the pastor's wife, eyes bright for witnesses. Gentle structure, he added, as if the word gentle could erase the way he grips elbows. I sipped once, then set the cup on a napkin and folded the napkin into a square. The folding gave my hand a job. Jobs keep hands honest. Brianna drifted closer and brought the phone up an inch. We keep a log, she told the banker's wife, in case we need to coordinate care. She said log like she had invented the word. I let her think it. I held up the bulletin and pointed at the Ramp Fund thank you line near the bottom. Harold Ruiz star beside the name. Denise Morales, a star and a heart, someone drew with a kid's pen. I read the donors aloud to the usher line with their names in the same order the list chose. People hear themselves best when they don't expect applause. Memory eats slander without help. The choir processed through for warm-up humming vowels like a distant fan. A young guardsman in civvies shook my hand near the cookie table and asked how to tell if a deck is grounded right. Eyes before hands, I said. Check the point twice and the torque once. He nodded like he had been waiting for that sentence since 9th grade. He asked when his unit's training cycle ends. I told him the Wednesday after Labor Day and named the sergeant who signs the advice slips. He tightened his jaw the way kids do when they pick up responsibility by the handle. A name is a handle. Ethan re-entered the circle with 2 cookies and an anecdote about my milk. He described it like he had posted a loss report. Last night he put it in the cabinet, he said, not to me but to the wall behind me. The wall declined to answer. I let the story sit until it stopped bouncing. Then I told Denise her grandson made E4 by October, and her face put the truth to bed with a blanket. Precision is not a symptom. Pastor arrived with that measured walk he has when he wants to make a room wider. He asked Ethan how the family was doing. Ethan exhaled a sound that invites sympathy and said we were exploring durable options. He made durable sound like a promise no one would have to keep. Pastor nodded and looked at me long enough for a breath to fully happen. I told him the hymn numbers were solid today, and that E minor makes the 3rd verse tell the truth. He smiled because he heard what I wasn't saying. Men who listen for verbs leave less damage. Brianna lifted the phone and took a selfie with a deacon's wife, angling so the banner above the coat rack read, "Welcome home." She kept me in the soft blur at the edge of her frame, the way a museum keeps a maintenance door just out of view. I changed my angle by half a step so my shoulders slid out of her shallow focus. Ownership prefers front and center. I prefer proof. I turned toward the glass display case that holds the mission's map and remembered that glass loves to store a second version of a moment. In the reflection, I caught Brianna's phone, her hand, my shoulder, the banner, the banker's wife, and Ethan stirring my narrative with a wooden spoon. I lifted my phone just high enough to see the composition and took one clean shot. The reflection held our whole set without asking who authored it. Documentation is a kind of revenge that never raises its voice. At the bulletin board by the side door, the papers overlapped like shingles on a roof. There it was again, the half sheet for parade volunteers. Harold's name starred the thumbtack bent just enough to leave a crescent in the cork. I pressed the corner flat and let my finger rest there as if the paper were a small animal that needed its heart counted. Then I took a photograph with the church bulletin's masthead visible in the lower corner. Breadcrumbs work better when the flour is still on the hands. Brianna reached past me to place a flyer about meal trains for a family I know would never ask. She smiled at the room and thanked everyone for caring. Kindness doesn't require correction. She missed the sentence because it did not look like a critique. It looked like room temperature. Ethan guided me to a chair and said I should sit. He said it like an invitation, but left no room for yes. I stayed standing and asked Joe if the west door was closing flush after the last adjustment. He said it creaked on cold mornings and touched his hip, a gesture men use for old injuries. I told him the hinge needed 1 degree clockwise on the top plate and that a pencil mark would show if the shift held. He grinned and told Ethan I always had an eye. Ethan nodded like that eye should defer to his better light. 2 teenagers cut across the hall with a tripod and nearly collided with the coffee urn. Brianna laughed and told them she had it covered. She lifted her phone for a wide-angle sweep of her life-saving care. I took a step to put a column between me and her lens. The column does not sign consent. The column takes excellent notes. The pastor moved near again and asked Ethan if he could pray for specific concerns. Ethan named fatigue and safety the way a man orders 2 staples off a menu. The pastor asked if he could see me on Tuesday for 5 minutes after choir. He said it with his eyes on mine. I said yes. Even agreements can be documented. He tapped my bulletin and told me to keep my eye on verse 3. Verse 3 sometimes saves a day. As people thinned toward the parking lot, Brianna's phone hung at her side, still recording introducing the floor to a version of events it had not asked for. I passed her and caught the lens in the reflection of the display case. I took another photo from the hip with the frame holding the phone's eye, her hand, and my absence from the center. Ownership denied while documentation secured. Outside by the steps, Ethan asked if I needed a ride and looked relieved when I said I would walk. He told me again about Thursday at 2 and said we'd make it easy. I told him Sunday makes Monday possible and left it there. He smiled like a man who thinks he won a point. No one was scoring. Back in the kitchen, the light found the ribbons the way it always does. I laid the church bulletin on the table and tucked a copy of the parade flyer under its edge. The thumbtack's crescent showed in the photo like a small moon where it should be. I placed the selfie reflection print beside it and wrote a line under the images in the log. Entry 01 teen, after service coffee. Son performs care. Brianna films for safety. Credibility passes donors named guardsman date recalled. The pastor heard both sides. Parade volunteer sheet documented. Reflection captures taken. Ownership refused. The house settled into its stance as the afternoon warmed. The manila envelope breathed once when I lifted the flap and slid the new prints in. The flap made its soft sound on the way down like a nod from a quiet friend. I looked at the flyer photo one more time. A star by Harold's name. A thumbtack moon. A straightened corner waiting for parade day. Some seeds sprout better in public light. The VFW post office kept its own weather. Blinds and stripes, light cut into bars across the desk. Flag shadows moving a half-inch when the air unit sighed. I knocked once and stepped in. Harold looked up from a legal pad and then at the square envelope under my jacket. He pointed at the desk and the chair without standing. This was not a ceremony. It was an appointment. I set the manila envelope on the blotter and flattened my palm on it until the paper calmed. Statements first, I said. Then VA letters. Q and email artifacts, recorder last. Harold nodded and opened the flap with a finger that had stamped more papers than most men signed. He did not rifle. He staged. Bank on the left, VA in the center, digital prints on the right. The recorder he placed on a felt square like a watchmaker. He slid a checklist across to me. Affidavit exhibits listed A through H with blank lines for exact names and dates. He spoke low the way a man talks on a flight line when the engine is running and you still want the other person to hear you clearly. "We do 2 lanes," he said. "Quiet prosecution, which includes subpoenas, bank reversals, and DA intake, all with minimal public attention. Or public reckoning, which is the same legal spine but under lights the town already built for Memorial Day. Both end at court, only one passes down Maple." I looked at the blinds and the flag shadow that knew its rhythm. "Public measured lawful," I said. He put a pencil mark beside the right-hand column and did not smile. He checked boxes on the affidavit checklist while I called out each exhibit. Bank statements with highlighted patterns and totals. Dates on the sticky notes matched the wall calendar. BVA capacity letters from Dr. Naomi Chen embossed 2 recent intervals, language unchanged. C email header print subject line. Final deed attachment visible time captured. D printer Q photos. File name final deed. GrantWhitaker.pdf. Spooling jam Wi-Fi name visible time captured. E HOA newsletter proof with my name misspelled in a care column marked and dated. F church reflection capture showing filming practice banner text within frame. G calendar screenshot for Thursday consult and message confirmation to Harold. H the audio device screen reads 42 minutes 13 seconds. He wrote the names clean, each letter the same height. Then he took a notary journal from the drawer and opened it to a page lined in narrow columns. Name ID checked, date time, type of act, document, description, thumbprint if required. He looked at me and said, "Swear to the truth of Exhibits A through H, as attached to the affidavit to the best of your knowledge." I raised my right hand the way I was taught and said I do. He pressed the notary embosser down on the affidavit signature page. The seal made a sound like a small hammer finding a true nail. Thunk. The impression stood up under my thumb. Pressure is proof when ink alone gets lonely. "Chain of custody," he said, and slid a printed form over. We logged the recorder's serial number, the condition of the device, the time of transfer, and the fact that the original would stay in my possession until a certified copy was made with a witness present. He filled a small label, Exhibit H Original, and stuck it to the device case, not the device. Label adhesive can betray a finish. He noted who touched what, my name, his name, and the assistant's name who would witness the copy. Names are a chain stronger than locks in rooms like this. He made 2 calls from a landline that has no surprises in it. "Rogers at the bank," he said, "after the first call knows to expect the reversal packet. DA intake will get a pre-brief file today, not with the audio yet, but with the bank and the Q prints and the letters." He wrote the DA pre-brief in the right column of his pad and underlined it once. 1 underline is enough for a man like Harold. Then he went to the credenza and took out a nomination sheet on VFW letterhead. Grand Marshal Memorial Day Parade with a line for the name and a line for the service summary. He clicked the pen and waited. "Read it," he said. I read the header and the criteria, then spelled my name aloud. He wrote it steadily. He asked me for the service line. 1st Aviation Battalion dates, locations, and the plain nouns that do not need adjectives. He slid the paper into a plastic sleeve and placed it in an outgoing tray. The tray creaked a little under the weight of becoming public. "Verification next," he said. He lifted a thin folder with my service record, the ugly version that counts hours and parts, not the pretty one with a single sentence. He compared the numbers to a summary he already had and nodded when they matched. He stamped a small stamp in the corner of the nomination copy received, 0907 hours. A stamp like that teaches a page how to be a fact. He opened his email and typed 2 short notes. One to Mendez at the county with a subject line that could belong to anything availability parade morning. One to the committee with 3 bullet points nomination capacity letters on file and service verified. Then he set the keyboard aside and took an index card. He wrote speaker logistics across the top, then penciled 2 minutes no names until documents in the air. He pushed the card toward me so I could read while he talked. 2 minutes, he said. "You open with honor, then totals and dates, then 1 official line. I do not need to say which official line, you know it, by the book," I said. He placed a small smile where it would not distract anyone and wrote that down as if it had details attached. He does not collect phrases for romance. He collects them because sound bites become screws when the wind picks up. An assistant stepped in with a gray case for the embosser and a red folder for signatures. She wore reading glasses on a chain that put its own order on the desk. She checked the exhibits against the list and marked them as received with a soft pencil, then initialed the bottom of the page. Her initials looked like two careful birds. She left as quietly as she arrived. Harold slid a voluntary statement form across to me. One paragraph in my handwriting summarizing the morning's purpose and the nature of the exhibits. He gave me a pen with a nib that catches if you press too hard. I wrote slowly and small the way they taught us when ink can ruin a form and the form can ruin a day. The recorder's red digits blinked once behind the felt, more a heartbeat than an alert. He wrote copy audio Wednesday, 9:30 and handed the card to the assistant through the open door. We walked to the meeting room where the committee sits. Long table, 3 flags behind it, coffee and paper cups at precisely the wrong temperature. 5 men I know by the way they stand in doorways took their seats. Harold read the nomination like it was weather neutral and important. He read my service summary without a flourish, dates and units and the line of work that keeps birds flying. He did not tell a story. He read a record. Any objections he asked. Chairs creaked. A cough found a pocket tissue. No voices rose. All in favor, he said. Hands came up, some fast, one slow, all honest. Carried, he said. The secretary wrote my name into minutes that will outlive any of us. The pen sounded good on the paper. Sound matters when you want to remember a vote. Back in the office, he took the nomination sleeve from the outgoing tray and showed me the committee stamp in the corner. Approved. He slid it back in and wrote a note to the parade marshal, tight letters that fit between lines because his hands have practice. He picked up the index card and added a 4th line in tiny print. Hold the recorder on the mic for 20 seconds only, then stop. He tapped the card with his pen like a pilot tapping a gauge. We reviewed the chain of custody form again, and I initialed the margins where initials belong. He wrote a 1-line email to the DA's office. Intake packet follows. Parade day will include public distribution. He attached nothing. Promises before attachments make men read attachments when they come. He dialed Mendez on the landline and kept it short. You are on my schedule for parade morning, he said. I will provide documents when the documents are air. Serve after remarks near the stand, no theatrics. Mendez said something I did not need to hear, and Harold said, yes, clipboard and pen on string. He hung up and wrote one word, confirmed. We stood together and looked at the pile on the desk. The affidavits, the exhibits, the nomination, the index card, and the chain of custody form with neat boxes filled. He nudged the embosser back into its case, and the lid closed with a hushed click. He looked at me, not through me. 2 minutes, he said again, because repetition is a kindness. I put my hand on the manila envelope where the seal shows through the front pocket. The paper felt like it had been taught how to carry weight. I said it once for the room and for my own breath. Public measured lawful. Harold answered with 4 words that fit a whole plan. By the book. He walked the nomination down the hall to the copy room himself. The assistant followed with the red folder. I stood by the blinds and watched the flag shadow keep time on the carpet. Somewhere in the building a copier started, and the tone rose and fell like a distant engine. The sound made the day feel lined up. He returned with 3 copies, 1 for the file, 1 for the parade desk, and 1 for me. He handed mine across the desk and nodded at the corner where the stamp sits. Keep this flat, he said. It should not learn a curl. He placed the index card on top of my envelope. Speaker logistics in pencil, 2 minutes. No names until documents are in the air. He underlined the last word with the side of the pencil so the line looked like a shadow more than a mark. Outside the office door, the hallway smelled like coffee that had been honest about its age. A little murmur from the lounge, a chair moving, someone setting a cup down too carefully. Harold picked up the phone and said 1 sentence to the local paper. The parade committee has selected our grand marshal release to follow this afternoon. Then he hung up and wrote 1 more small note. Press hold until confirmation of capacity letters on file, then release. He reminded me about the copy appointment for the audio and the way we would handle the device. You carry the original to the stand, he said. We copy and seal after. He touched the chain of custody form with 2 fingers and tapped the spot where my initials sat. Then he held the door with his palm. A gesture as old as doors. When I stepped back into the hallway, the flag shadow moved that half-inch again and stopped. The air unit hummed. The envelope under my arm learned my ribs. Paper seal recorder schedule. The parts lined up the way an aircraft skin sits on a frame that was expected. We walked out to the brightness without a word. Some plans do not need more. I kept my gait the same. Same walk around the block. Same nod at the mailbox. Same cup from the same cabinet. Habit is a disguise that needs no acting. Ethan took the bait the way a man bites an apple after deciding it belongs to him. He came by late afternoon with numbers in his teeth. Once we get the papers signed, he said we can refinance clean. Rates are soft. We can fold the Audi in. He used it like a tarp. I leaned on the counter and watched the kettle warm. If it is for the house, I said. Everything for the house. 9 words. He took them like permission. I took them like a record. Thursday came gray and cold at the edges. I put the recorder in my shirt pocket and set the manila envelope in my jacket where it could learn my ribs again. On top, the email header is printed with its subject yelling, "Final deed signed Thur" in useful red ink. Behind it, the printer Q photo with its stubborn spooling the Wi-Fi name in the corner and the little red circle around the jammed. I did not plan to show any of it today. I planned to carry it like a good luck charm that believes in paperwork. The office was glass on 2 sides and a painting of a river on the third. A receptionist had a voice trained to make the weather feel manageable. "Sign here," she said, and slid a clipboard. Visitor sticker in blue letters. I pressed it to my jacket where the adhesive could tug hair and keep me from touching it. I want cameras to know where to look. Harold sat in the lobby chair that reduces soldiers a size. He wore his suit like he might wear anything he is given with discipline. A thin envelope rested against his briefcase sealed with a small strip across the flap. He lifted 2 fingers, then angled the envelope so I could read a handwritten note on the front without making a show. TRO draft. Service packets are behind. He tapped the folder once with a knuckle and nodded at my sticker. "Let them see it," he said. "Seeing does the work." Ethan and Brianna arrived 10 minutes late the way people do when they intend to prove they had somewhere more important to be. Brianna carried a folder that matched her shoes. Ethan carried urgency. He shook my hand too long and patted it like he knew where the bones should be. "Glad you made it, champ," he said. He has never called me champ. New words are costumes. The attorney's conference room had a table that punished elbows. He wore a suit that respected corners. Ethan started before the door clicked. "Dad's been slipping a bit," he said, voice tuned to sympathy. "Small confusions. We want to make sure bills get paid. We brought some notes." He slid a printout of my calendar across as if I had never seen one. The attorney folded his hands and placed a pen on top like a ruler. "We can explore a narrow guardianship," he said, "or a durable power of attorney." He let the word durable sit where the sun could find it. "We will need to discuss support housing and preferences." He smiled like the smile was in his fee schedule. "Do you have any questions, Mr. Whitaker?" I looked at the water pitcher and poured 1 glass but did not drink. "2 questions," I said. "Who are the witnesses? How is the notary verified?" He blinked once because I had started in the middle where forms live. 2 unrelated witnesses, he said. Not family. Licensed notary with identity proofing. He used the word unrelated like he was remembering a test answer. Ethan leaned forward, eager to impress the room with lines learned from someone else's article. "We can bring friends from the neighborhood," he said. "People who know Dad." The attorney said unrelated again this time like he understood his own sentence. Brianna opened her folder and produced a neat stack. "Drafts," she said, smiling at the table. "Just so Dad can see what language looks like on paper." She placed them precisely. The top sheet flashed the outline of a deed like a trap under leaves. The witness line at the bottom held her name in careful loops. The second line was empty. My eyes stayed on the blank and let it speak. Ethan watched me watch it. "That is just preliminary," he said. "No notary yet. We will do it properly." He said it properly like a promise that costs less than ink. The attorney cleared his throat like a signal at a crosswalk. "Let's take this step by step," he said. "We can begin with a conversation about values and routines." Ethan smiled as if he had written the curriculum. "He loves structure," he said, and put a soft hand near my elbow. I set my elbow away without moving the rest of me. "An agreement is a big coat. You can hide a lot under it." I set it to the water and let the sentence sit. The attorney's pen paused in the air and then resumed its little mile. He asked about morning and night. I said I wake early and sleep after the 11 o'clock news. He asked about transportation. I said I drive the Honda. He asked about medication. I put the pill organizer in the light and said the days out loud like a man does when he means to be boring and clear. He wrote notes that looked orderly even before he knew if they would matter. Ethan moved to finances, a lane he thinks his name built. We have handled auto pays, he said. There were a few duplicates. He showed a color bar chart that made him look busy. I nodded because nodding can be a form of silence. The manila envelope warmed under my jacket. The bank freezes sat there with their little padlocks, patient as winter. The attorney looked at his watch and then at me. We can prepare forms for next week if the family agrees in principle, he said. Nothing binding today. He looked relieved to be able to say nothing. I looked at the visitor sticker and at the way the corner tried to lift and caught on hair. Some things will not detach if you place them right. Brianna asked if we could reserve a notary for Thursday. The attorney said not without the witnesses pre-qualified. He almost smiled when he said pre-qualified, as if he had stepped into a hole and then remembered where the ladder was. She blinked and smiled anyway. We can ask neighbors, she said. The attorney ran his pen under the word unrelated on his own notes. Ethan's laptop chimed, and a notification bloomed like a rash in the corner of the screen. He slapped it closed and smiled without teeth. Just the bank, he said. They like to ping me about rates. I watched the hinge and did not ask what rates they wanted with a draft deed. The printer Q photo inside my jacket felt like a second tongue. The attorney offered a summary and the kind of folder that pretends to mean progress. He stood. Ethan stood faster. We are all on the same team, he said to the room, to the light, to the pen. He waited for affirmation. I looked at the clock instead. 2:29. I prefer clocks to teams. In the lobby, Harold sat where he had been, the thin envelope still sealed, his hands folded. He watched my face the way men do when they need one datum before they file their report. Nothing signed, I said. He nodded once and slid the envelope an inch back into the briefcase. Good, he said. Easy runs out. Brianna thanked the receptionist by name, loud enough to be heard by the people who collect kindness like coins. Ethan shook Harold's hand and introduced him to the receptionist as our attorney. Harold corrected him with one sentence, and the kind of smile that leaves room for air. I am here as a commander and a notary, he said. Counsel is elsewhere. The receptionist nodded like she had stepped out of a draft. Outside, Brianna asked if I wanted lunch. I said no. She began to insist and then looked at Harold and stopped. Ethan said he would text me about paperwork. I said all communication through counsel and let the sentence land without heat. He blinked as if the sidewalk had shifted under him. Then they left in a hurry which did not seem like a purpose. We stood on the step and watched the cars exchange the lot's narrow lanes like cards in a dealer's hand. Harold let the silence stand long enough to become useful. He asked how the pen felt on the attorney's table. He knew the answer. Slick, I said. He nodded. We will use our own paper, he said, and put his palm on the briefcase. At home, I set the visitor sticker on the case log page and pressed it down flat like a leaf you want to remember. The adhesive left a wrinkle where it fought the paper. I wrote the entry. Entry 021. Consult attended. Attorney confirms 2 unrelated witnesses plus a licensed notary. Draft deed observed. Witness line 1. Brianna. Line 2, blank. No notary. Ethan speaks of refinancing after papers. Brianna requests a notary reservation. Declined. Nothing signed. Visitor sticker affixed. I added a line and gave it its own space. An agreement is a big coat. You can hide a lot under it. I placed the sticker page beside the email header print and the printer Q photo. The 3 together made a small chorus ready for a stage. The manila envelope closed without complaint. I slid it to the center of the table so the seal in the front pocket caught the kitchen light. The house settled its shoulders. A jay in the maple scolded a world that had it coming. The day had done its work. The next day knew what to do with that. Maple Avenue held its breath and beat a soft drum. Snare taps stitched the morning into a line you could follow without looking down. The color guards squared their flags so the stripes read like orders. The lead convertible rolled slowly and honestly, red hood catching sunlight in slices. My metals answered the light the way beacons answer fog. Not decoration, direction. Harold stood at the reviewing stand and faced the microphone like it was a checklist, not a stage. Behind him, bunting a long table with programs of pictures sweating onto plywood the way parades always do. He did not clear his throat. He read, Name service unit dates. 31 years on aircraft you do not see until they bring men home. No adjectives, nouns with service numbers. He cleared a runway with words. I stood the convertible idling at the chalk mark. I raised my right hand the way a young man does when he meets an oath he can carry. I took the microphone and let the cord fall straight. I am not here for pity, I said. I am here with receipts. The snare line softened to a pulse. I opened the manila envelope. Paper lifted like breath. I placed packet 1 on the table and turned it so the highlighter caught the sun. Audi, I said. 34 months every 4th. Transportation for Dad. The yellow lines ran true down the page. I read a total, then a second number, then the dates beside them. Amber Slate Flora. Restaurants tagged care on nights my calendar shows I was home with tea after 9. These are not meals. They are invoices. A woman in the second row drew air through her teeth. Sound enough? Packet 2, I said, and held the VA letter so the embossed seal stood up under the morning. Dr. Naomi Chen, oriented to person, place, time, and situation, adherent to treatment. No evidence of diminished capacity. The ridges of the seal threw a thin shadow that you could see from the curb. I read the sentence again with the calm of a pre-flight. It did not need help. Packet 3. Email header. Subject reads final deed attachment visible time stamped. Printer queue. File name final deed grantwhitaker.pdf. Spooling. Jammed. I let the photos sit in the air long enough to do their math. A man in a ball cap leaned forward and squinted as if the mistake would fix itself if he stared with enough manners. I set the recorder on the edge of the microphone. The red numbers read 4213, where everyone could see them. The bandmaster lifted a hand and the snare tap stopped with a clean goodbye. I pressed play. Ethan's voice came thin and sure. He signs anything if you keep him talking. Brianna's laugh answered in a small square. We will say it is for safety. I let 20 seconds walk across the wood and pressed stop. Chain of custody intact, I said. The recorder went back inside my jacket where the rib bones keep better records than pockets ever will. Harold lifted 2 fingers in a gesture that would not frighten a bird. It was enough. Deputy Mendez stepped from the side stairs and onto the platform, boots quiet on plywood clipboard level as a spirit. He wore the day the way good officers wear days, with patience. He did not face the crowd. He faced the names. Ethan Whitaker, he said. No, sir. No, sir, it is not disrespectful. It is a procedure. Temporary restraining order. Cadet County Court, effective immediately. His voice carried without reaching. He held the packet out. Ethan took it because that is what hands do when paper with weight moves toward them. Brianna Whitaker Mendez said. Notice of pending fraud complaint. He placed the second packet in her hand with the same gravity. The pen on the string tapped the clipboard once, then rested. 2 taps would have been a flourish. 1 tap is work. Ethan started a sentence that opened with misunderstandings. It lost its mouth halfway through. He looked at the crowd, then at the paper, then at Harold, then at me. He found no place to anchor the word. Brianna held her packet by the corner like heat lives in court headers. Harold stepped 1 pace forward enough to share the air and own none of it. All communication goes through counsel, he said. He did not raise his chin. The touch of his shoe found the mark on the platform that someone had drawn with chalk at dawn. I looked at the kids under the flags and at the veterans standing with 2 fingers at their brows. I picked up the VA letter once more and let the seal catch the sun a final time. The highlighter on the bank lines burned steadily green. The printer queue photo showed the name and the jam without apology. I set the letter down with the calm of a mechanic returning a wrench to its slot. We fix theft the way we fix aircraft, I said. By the book. The crowd did not cheer. It breathed. A sound moved down Maple like wind through a cornfield when it chooses a single direction. The color guard held steady. The snare line found a low heartbeat. The stand did not shake. The law stood up straight. Mendez stepped off the platform and returned to his place at stage right with the discipline of a man who knows the difference between a moment and a spectacle. He spoke to a volunteer at the rope line with the tone you use to discuss shade. Harold stacked the packets in a neat row and capped his pen. He glanced at the index card by the microphone, the one that reads 2 minutes, no names until documents in the air. He slid the card into his pocket. It had done its work. I handed the microphone back to Harold and lifted my hand in a small square acknowledgement. Not a wave. Waving belongs to parades that are only parades. He thanked the crowd for their attention and asked them to continue remembering the reason we measure a morning like this in steady steps. The band heard his words and started the cadence with the same left that began the day. The driver eased the convertible forward. The engine made a sound that did not argue. People shifted to let us pass and did not talk until the car cleared the breath width of the platform. In the third row, a boy held his program up to catch the way the seal's ridges make small shadows under the sun. He will show it to someone later, and that person will learn how paper holds light. Ethan stood under the bunting with his packet loose in his hand. Brianna kept hers pinched at a corner as if a wrinkle could change the words. No one touched them. Not even the air tried. A woman who knows them by louder summers looked at the numbers on the page and back at their faces and put her purse strap higher on her shoulder. She understood what could be carried and what could not. We turned onto Cedar. Children went back to waving at the fire engine behind us. A vet raised 2 fingers and dropped them with a small accuracy. Somewhere a dog barked because sound invites sound. The morning stepped back into its shoes. At the next intersection, the color guard executed a clean pivot. The flags did not quiver. The snare line marked cadence with the quiet that knows microphones have finished their part. I put my palm on the envelope at my side and felt paper answer like a living thing that has been taught what to do. The reviewing stand receded with its bunting and its chalk marks and its clipboard string. The town had seen paper move. It will talk in the kitchens tonight. It will read in the Chronicle tomorrow. It will check its mirrors and find itself standing with a posture it did not have last week. We crossed in front of the post office where stamps still teach envelopes how to matter. The sun tilted and tagged the edges of the metals once more, then left them alone. The law does not require glare. It requires names on pages, seals that rise under a thumb, and a deputy who reads without effort in the right spot on the right morning. That is enough. Tuesday's mail thudded like it knew its weight. The bank crest stared up in blue that didn't blink. I slit the envelope with a key and read the first line twice. Chargebacks initiated. The letter listed merchants and dates, provisional credits, and windows. It was named a fraud case number that felt like coordinates. I pinned the letter to the corkboard and took its photo under the kitchen light. Paper is a compass when people aren't. By noon, Rogers at the bank left a voicemail in a voice that respected edges. Joint account freeze, confirmed, he said. Administrative hold on the debit. Fraud case escalated. He gave me a number and spelled it like a cereal. I wrote it in the margin of the letter with a pen that doesn't skip. Numbers wear better in ink than in mouths. Wednesday broke with a truck on the curb and no apologies. 2 men in quiet shirts loaded the Audi without theater. Hazard lights clicked a metronome that didn't care who owned shame. A slip went under the mat with a stain of oil at the corner. Repossession, it said, 3 months behind, office confirmed. I photographed the slip before the due left the welcome script. Dawn is honest about debts. An email arrived with a subject that hated adjectives. License suspended pending investigation. Missouri Department of Insurance. The body wore statutes and an effective date like armor. Alleged violations are listed like parts on a bench. I printed it and underlined the time with my thumbnail before the ink set. The underlines hold when tempers don't. By afternoon, another envelope sat in a neat stack. Notice of termination from HR that never says sorry and never has to. Effective immediately, it read. Suspension of professional license. Pending criminal inquiry. Best wishes in future endeavors. I slid the letter behind the bank notices and pressed the air out with my palm. Documents keep each other from curling when they share a corner. Thursday morning, the Chronicle placed a headline above the fold that had no room for doubt. Veteran brings receipts at parade. The photo caught the VA seal mid-sun and the recorder's digits lit like a brake light. In the left frame, Mendez's clipboard anchored reality with a pen on string. I taped the page above the phone and let the print smell fill the kitchen. Ink is a kind of witness when cameras go home. The HOA sent its statement at 3 in the afternoon with a subject that pretended nothing had happened. We reaffirm our commitment to transparency and safety. They didn't use names. They never use names when they shut a door. Volunteer leadership paused until resolution, it said. Pause means look through the window, not invite inside. The church's email landed with the gentler grammar of a hand on a shoulder. Request for accountability meeting, it said. The body offered date options and a pie afterward. Pastor's name at the bottom, no adjectives above it. We prefer nouns that outlast moods. Harold called with the tone of a man who knows meetings are machines. DA intake confirmed, he said. Alvarez has the bank packet, the Q photos, the headers, and the letters. Interviews next. Plea talks if the books keep singing the same hymn. He didn't ask if I wanted spectacles. He knows mornings prefer certainty. The DA's slip arrived on cream paper that doesn't apologize for its thickness. Intake confirmation. It read with a box checked in black that wouldn't wash. Assigned ADA K. Alvarez. Next contact estimated 14 to 21 days. I copied the date in the top corner, then clipped the slip to the DA folder where the chain of custody form sleeps. Folders are bunkers when storms forget their place. Friday noon brought a shorter ring from Harold. Alvarez wants to propose terms before indictment, he said. Restitution under supervision. Community service at the VA clinic. No direct contact. It is the right order of verbs. He stood quietly until I breathed in and out once. Certainty over spectacle, I said. He wrote that down without commentary. Spectacle is for people who need reminders. Ethan tried a text that he thought was a bridge. We can talk. We made mistakes. I printed it and left the warm page under the bank letters until the curl learned obedience. The paper teaches sentences how to stand up straight. Time teaches men the same thing. That afternoon, Mendez walked up my steps with polite boots and a clipboard that never learns drama. He confirmed service had been acknowledged and signed for. He asked if I needed anything else recorded. I told him the porch light buzzed when the box got hot. He laughed once with the kind of breath you save for small mercies. He left his card under a magnet shaped like a propeller. Some magnets know where they belong. The Chronicle ran a follow-up 2 days later with the kind of line towns repeat at checkout counters. Evidence speaks, it said, under the fold. The photo showed the moment Harold's finger marked the margin of the packet stack. The caption named the deputy's badge number and spelled it right. Names spelled right keep rooms calmer. The HOA sent a second note with an agenda that pretended we only had budgets. This time, the line about the volunteer pause sat in parentheses like a whisper. Parentheses can hold a man outside a room. I printed the agenda and drew a green box around the line until the ink showed through. Green bleeds when you want it to. The accountability meeting sat Tuesday night with custard pie and the smell of wax. Pastor opened with a verse about walking humbly that stopped 2 steps shy of a lecture. Ethan used the word exhausted 4 times. Brianna said safety twice and love 5. I set the VA letter on the table and let the seal throw its shadow. Pastor turned the page and read the sentence that ends arguments without raising a voice. No evidence of diminished capacity. Hymns do the rest. The bank followed with a second letter that translated provisional into posted. Credits applied, it read. Fraud case advanced to the network. The new total looked like air coming back after a long hallway. I pinned that letter under the first and wrote the difference in the margin small and squared. Math tastes like water when you haven't had enough. Saturday at dusk, the street made room for a truck that pulls more dignity than metal. Mrs. Klein watched through her curtains as the Audi-shaped space reclaimed its regular shadow. The night folded wrong and then corrected itself. Absence sometimes fits better than presence. Sunday at the Post, Harold asked for 5 minutes and got them with the ease of a man who doesn't waste anyone's time. He stood at the lectern and held one sheet. The Post has been voted on, he said. The Whitaker Veteran Dignity Fund will open this month. Grants for elders facing family exploitation, notary fees, P.O. boxes, initial consults. He listed the verbs like a checklist. People nodded when they heard nouns they could carry. It sounded like bolts tightening. He handed me a thank you note printed on VFW letterhead with handwriting that leaned forward. First grants issued, it read. Ms. R.'s notary covered Mr. L.'s P.O. box opened. Mrs. D.'s consult booked. You gave them a door. I taped the note beside the Chronicle and let the 3 corners make a triangle you could cite down. Triangles stand when rectangles complain. Alvarez called on a Monday that started with rain. She spoke like the weather, calm and definite. Terms formalized, she said. Restitution with a scheduled community service at the VA clinic. No direct contact, no residence entry. We will file the agreement this week if council signs. She paused long enough to hear if I wanted to trade certainty for theater. I did not. When systems turn, you don't push, you document the angle. I wrote that line at the bottom of the log because it deserved a floor. It sat under the entry like a jack under a frame. Ethan's HR mailed a form letter that pretended no one had ever met. Benefits ceased, it said. Cobra information attached. The packet made no sound when it hit the table. Silence is sometimes a door closing on its hinges. I filed it under the bank reversals and the license suspension notice and put a clip through the stack that has learned to carry its weight. The church sent minutes from the accountability night with no adjectives and the list of actions in bullets. Brianna's name appears next to a line that says apology forthcoming in writing. I printed the minutes and taped them near the window where morning will be read in the morning. Morning is a good witness when you need one. Harold dropped by with a quiet coin and a cup of coffee you can drink without sugar. He left the coin beside the shadow box and did not touch the glass. He asked if I was sleeping. I told him nights had learned their place. He nodded and said he had penciled Mendez for parade day next year. Habit keeps towns safe. I stood in the kitchen and looked at the board. Bank reversal letters, license suspension notice, Chronicle front page DA intake slip thank you note from the fund, HOA agenda, with the green box church minutes. The pins made a geometry that holds a wall up. The envelope lay flat, the seal still proud. The recorder slept with its face down like a tool that had earned it. Alvarez's courier brought a single sheet on cream with a heading that knows how to sit. Plea agreement, it said. Signature lines waited in their boxes with the patience of fields. I read the terms and touched the ink and called Harold. He arrived with a pen that prefers calm. We set the paper under the light and let it learn the room. Certainty is nothing more than paper that has met the right morning. I signed where my name belongs and let the page dry. Harold signed as a witness and closed his pen with a click that liked being heard. He slid the agreement into a sleeve and the sleeve into a folder and the folder into his case. The zipper moved without a snag. A man learns to value that. Outside, the rain moved off like a decision had been made. The maple dropped 3 wet leaves that made no plans for drama. I put a fresh tack in the corkboard and let the angle show itself. The room squared, the house squared, the record squared. We had had enough. Dawn put a clean edge on the porch rail. Steam rose from the cup and made a small cloud that did not need attention. The street held its breath the way good streets do. The house behind me stayed quiet like a dog that knows it has done its job. I leaned on the post and watched the maple invent a few new shadows for the morning. The air tasted like wet leaves and last night's rain rinsed clean. Inside the shadow box, waited by the kitchen switch. Unit patch. The cassette spine with motor pool and grease pencil. The parade pass with my name in block print. 3 squares under glass level and still. I checked the bubble on the level when I mounted it. The bubble sat where it belonged and stayed there. A man sleeps better when bubbles mind their lanes. The challenge coin from Harold sat on the sill, heavy and quiet. He had set it down with a fingertip and said 10 words that made a room feel correct, for doing it by the book. He did not make a speech. He did not move the coin after it landed. His palm went to the door and he went down the steps without a creak. The coin reflects morning like it prefers small duties to big plans. On the table, the certified mail receipts formed a grid under a clear sleeve. Green cards with initials that lean this way and that. Dates written by hands trained by counters. The grid looked like a runway you do not worry about at night. I penciled a small line at the edge and wrote complete beside it. 1 word. It does more work than 10 if you let it. All communication goes through Harold. I wrote that on a card above the phone and set a clip at the top so the card will not wander. When Ethan's lawyer wrote, Harold forwarded with 3 words in the subject that need no decoration. Received, acknowledged, filed. I printed the email and clipped it behind the DA intake slip. The clip snapped shut with that quiet confidence good metal has. The sound rides around in a kitchen like a promise that knows the law. Mrs. Klein brought peach cobbler warm enough to perfume the steps. She apologized for guessing at the cinnamon, the kind that smells like a house, I said. She laughed into her sleeve and stepped back 1 tile so I would not have to. We ate a square at the table with the window up and did not say parade or paper. Some pies do the talking. A young guardsman knocked at noon with an expression that could mark a map. He held a notebook like a tool he had not been trained to trust. "Mr. Whitaker," he said, "I keep breaking connectors to learn which ones matter." He looked at the shadow box and then at my hands. We pulled a sheet of graph paper and drew a harness with 2 test points and a known ground. He wrote the numbers where they belong and set his pencil down exactly where the ruler's edge says it is. "Touch plastic, not pins," I told him. "Eyes before hands. If it will not seat you, turned it wrong, not the world." He wrote the rule twice on the top line because he heard it click. I showed him the coffee can of bolts that still matter and the labels that keep them tame. He put his hand flat and felt the weight of a washer if it could teach him torque. He asked how much to turn. "Until it clicks," I said. "Then you stop." He will carry that sentence into rooms I will never see. That is the best kind of travel. The school counselor called on Wednesday, a voice with chalk dust in it. "We run a panel for seniors," she said. "Jobs that keep people alive without being loud. Would you come?" I looked out at the porch and the leaves and the spot on the rail where the morning likes to sit. "Yes," I said. "Sigh. I will bring a diagram and an old story about a ground that saved a wing. Kids remember diagrams if you give them a handhold." The church minutes arrived with the usual respect for nouns. No adjectives, just action lines and time stamps. An apology letter from Brianna is attached as a separate file. 3 paragraphs. Full sentences. I printed it and clipped it to the back of the folder. I wrote no reply on the tab. Not unkind, just useful. Rooms stay orderly when paper knows which way it faces. I made coffee slowly and wrote a note on an index card for the panel. Signal before force. Read the manual. Respect the torque. The card sat beside the phone where it could collect a little light. The pen that made the lines preferred a calm hand. It is easy to press too hard and make edges bleed. The same is true of days. The Chronicle's headlines had moved on to a fireworks permit dust-up and a small flood by the creek. My photo came down from the board. I slid it into a sleeve behind the thank you note from the fund. The Whitaker Veteran Dignity Fund issued its first 3 grants this week. Notary fee for Ms. R. P.O. Box for Mr. L. Intake, consult for Mrs. D. The letter said you gave them a door. The sentence looked like it wanted to be read twice. I read it twice. Tony Rodriguez's kids came by with a paper plane they had hammered out of a legal pad. We tested different folds and agreed on the one that lifts its nose when boys throw too hard. We flew 3 in the hallway and did not hit the lamp. The dog 2 houses down barked once and remembered he had other duties. Tony's oldest asked if the medals were heavy. I told him they are when you forget what they are for. He nodded like a veteran in a small shirt. Thursday morning, I went to the school with the cassette and a copy of a wiring diagram for a bird that never complains until it cannot leave the ground. The students gave me the sort of silence that lets a man remember words on purpose. I told them how a loose ground can feel like fate if you refuse to read. I showed them the recorder and the number that had made a town stand at attention without shouting. They leaned forward when they saw the digits. Then they leaned back and wrote the rule. Measure. Turn. Stop. Back home, the mailbox gave up a last green card with an initial I did not recognize. I placed it at the end of the grid and pressed the sleeve flat. The grid looked satisfied. I brushed a thumb across the plastic to push a small bubble toward the edge. The bubble vanished like a minor problem that decided to belong to yesterday. Harold stopped by with a small paper bag and a smile that he set down gently. "Sandwiches from the post," he said. He asked about the panel and nodded at the words that kids wrote down. He tapped the challenge coin once against the sill. The sound was not loud, but it traveled anyway. He told me Mendez had been penciled for next year's parade. Good habits deserve calendars. Ethan tried one more text, and I sent the auto-reply that saves men from their worst timing. All communication goes through counsel. It is a gate you can close without slamming. The phone went quiet. Quiet does not mean empty. It means measured. I swept the porch and set the broom into the corner where the bristles like to live. I tightened the loose screw on the kitchen chair with a quarter turn because it was time for that. I checked the attic pull rope and ran my thumb along the fray to see if it wanted to talk. It did not. The house breathed the way a body breathes when it has found its pace again. At dusk, the maple broadcast a few leaves with no plans for drama. The neighbors walked a dog and did not cross the street because they did not need to. The boys next door argued about a ball that remembers lines. A train far off reminded the air that tracks keep promises when the right engineer minds the throttle. I stood with one hand on the jam and looked at the pencil marks from a year that does not complain when another year stands in front of it. I turned the coin once for light and put it back on its edge. I placed the index card from the school by the shadow box and wrote one more line below the rules. Justice is torque. You turn till it clicks. Then you stop. The words sat there in plain ink and did the work no louder phrase could do. I opened the kitchen window an inch and let the evening find its way through the screen. Birds tuned down and ceded the hour to crickets who know how to count. The porch light gave a soft hum. I set the cup in the sink and ran water just until the rim lost memory of coffee. I wiped the counter and folded the towel and hung it the way it prefers to be hung. Then I touched the latch with 2 fingers the way you lay a hand on a good dog. The metal felt cool and friendly. I turned it until it told me what I was listening for. The soft click of a lock. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the playlist now showing on screen.